God's watch. For example, President Roosevelt, acting to prevent a black-led march on Washington, issued an executive order in 1941 that barred racial discrimination in the defense industries, even as the military remained segregated. President Roosevelt's order drastically increased jobs for blacks in manufacturing cities like Chicago and Baltimore. Additionally, with so many white men gone to fight the war, a wave of black workers moved from low-paying agricultural and domestic jobs to work in factories. Quote, "The war and defense work," an African-American woman later explained with emotion, "gave black people the opportunity to do things they had never experienced before, and their expectations changed." The nation was changing. Aunt Annie's life was changing. Between 1943 and 1945, black public school teachers fought for equal pay in Tampa, Florida, Charleston, South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, Newport News, Virginia, Little Rock, Arkansas, and Birmingham, Alabama. And between 1939 and 1950, the median income for non-white workers rose from 41% to 60% of the white median income, according to historian Philip S. Foner. Economic successes paralleled political ones. In 1945, a Baptist minister from Harlem named Adam Clayton Powell became the first African-American from New York to serve in Congress. In 1946, more than 20 African-Americans were serving in state legislatures. Between 1940 and 1947, the percentage of black Southerners registered to vote increased from 2% to 12%. Future Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, whose biography I wrote, was winning Supreme Court cases as the top lawyer for the NAACP during the 1940s. He won a case giving black people voting rights in the Texas Democratic primary, Smith versus Allwright, and would soon win cases ending restrictions on sale of property to blacks and even cases allowing blacks to go to law school. His cases would lead up to the famous Brown versus Board of Education case in 1954. Aunt Annie kept her faith even after the war, as America celebrated its victory over Nazis and imperialists, but still practiced racial oppression at home. Black people, Latinos, Filipinos, and other racial minorities on American military bases around the world, including in Aunt Annie's Panama, felt the same sting of segregation as blacks in the United States. She knew the bitter reality of blacks in the back of the bus, praying in separate churches, children sent to inferior schools, and men segregated in the military even as they bled and died for the nation. And as a sports fan, she lived the reality that blacks were kept out of the nation's most popular sport, all-white Major League Baseball. Sports in the mid-20th century was an accurate reflection of American life, including the torment of racism. All this is to say that by April 15, 1947, the day that Jackie Robinson joined Dixie Walker and Pee Wee Reese to face the Boston Braves, Aunt Annie and other African Americans were primed for a hero, a leader to spearhead their fight to be treated as equals on the baseball field. As you'll soon see in Ed Henry's book, faith in God gave Rickey the confidence to bring Robinson to the big leagues. It was faith in God, too, that allowed Robinson to endure the endless racist taunts of players who didn't want an African American in their midst. Now it is ironic that my aunt and so many African Americans should find spiritual sustenance in a Christian God. After all, almost none of the 12 million African slaves brought to the New World between the 16th and 19th centuries were originally Christian. In fact, many of the European colonists believed that converting slaves to Christianity justified slavery. To the slave master, Christianity was a tool. They hired preachers who taught their slaves about religion, but rather than explaining, for instance, the love of Jesus Christ, the preachers used the Bible to ensure obedience among them. Slave masters even used scripture to legitimize slavery. Quoting Paul's letter to the Ephesians, they proclaimed, "Slaves, be obedient to your masters." But the black faithful saw a different God. They reinterpreted the story of the Jewish exodus from their enslavement in Egypt as reason to pray for their own salvation, their own freedom. In their songs, the word Canaan referred to the north, where slavery had been abolished. As historian Albert J. Rabbitoe has indicated, they were attracted to Old and New Testament figures like Mary, Thomas, Peter, Moses, Joshua, Noah, and Daniel, all of whom were tested by God or Jesus in some way. Like these biblical figures, the black people, even as slaves, saw their status as temporary, a test of their faith in God. As Quentin Dixie and I wrote more than a decade ago in a book titled This Far by Faith, black slaves cultivated an intense faith that God would one day end their struggle. In the decades following the Civil War, former slaves and their progeny developed and were given structure.